She stood in a white dress at Westminster Abbey and, accidentally, became one of the most photographed women on earth. She didn't ask for it, didn't chase it, and for years did everything in her power to manage it gracefully. But managing a public image is one thing. Managing a marriage quietly cracking under the weight of two completely incompatible lives is something else entirely. Pippa Middleton has spent most of her adult life navigating a space that very few people ever occupy. Not royal, but royally adjacent. Not anonymous, but not quite famous enough to be protected. And now, at 41, the woman who smiled through every uncomfortable camera flash, every tabloid headline, and every family comparison is finally letting the truth breathe. This is not a story about scandal. There was no explosive affair, no courtroom drama, no screaming match caught on a paparazzo's lens. This is something quieter and, in many ways, more devastating. This is the story of two people who genuinely cared for each other, but built a life on foundations that were never truly compatible, and the slow, inevitable moment when that became impossible to ignore. To understand where Pippa Middleton is today, you have to understand where she came from. She was raised in Bucklebury, a small village in Berkshire, the middle child of Michael and Carol Middleton. Her father had worked as a flight dispatcher, her mother as a flight attendant. The family was not aristocratic. They were self-made, disciplined, and deeply ambitious. They built a successful party supply business called Party Pieces and used that foundation to send their children to excellent schools, instill strong values, and craft the kind of polished presentation that would later serve the Middleton name well in the highest circles of British society. Pippa grew up in Catherine's shadow, not because she lacked presence, but because her older sister's trajectory was simply extraordinary. When Kate began dating Prince William at the University of St. Andrews, the family's quiet life began its slow transformation. But even before Kate's engagement made global headlines, Pippa had already carved her own lane. She attended the University of Edinburgh, studied English literature, built a reputation in London's elite social circuit, and by 2008 had been named the United Kingdom's top society singleton, a title that sounds trivial, but actually reflected something real. People were paying attention to Pippa Middleton independently, not just as a royal footnote. Then came April 29, 2011, the day Catherine Middleton married Prince William at Westminster Abbey. Pippa walked in as maid of honor in a form-fitting white Alexander McQueen dress, and within hours the internet had collectively lost its mind. Fashion editors wrote entire features. Her dress became the most searched clothing item of that year. Royal commentators like Katie Nicholl, who has covered the monarchy extensively for Vanity Fair and authored books including The New Royals, noted that Pippa's moment at that wedding was entirely unplanned in terms of public impact. She was simply doing her job as a sister and a bridesmaid, and yet the world responded as if she had deliberately stepped onto a global stage. The attention was not something she engineered. It was something that happened to her. That distinction matters enormously when you try to understand the central tension of her marriage to James Matthews. Pippa met James Matthews on the Caribbean island of St. Bart's, where his family owned the Eden Rock Hotel, a luxury retreat that has hosted celebrities, financiers, and royalty for decades. James was a former racing driver who had transitioned into running Eden Rock Capital Management, a successful hedge fund. He was disciplined, private, and by most accounts deeply uncomfortable with the spotlight. He was not a man who gave press interviews or attended charity galas for the sake of visibility. He was a man who built his life deliberately away from public consumption. When the couple went public in 2016 and married in a lavish ceremony at St. Mark's Church in Englefield, Berkshire, the following year, it appeared to many observers like a perfect match. He had stability and wealth. She had grace and visibility. But what looks balanced from the outside can feel deeply uneven from within. According to multiple sources reported by publications, including the Daily Mail and Hello magazine, in the years following their wedding, James and Pippa began showing signs of lifestyle incompatibility almost immediately after the honeymoon ended. Pippa, by nature and by circumstance, was a woman who lived publicly, not because she craved attention in a performative sense, but because her identity had been shaped by years of existing in spaces where being seen was both expected and necessary. She had written a lifestyle book, Celebrate, published in 2012, which received mixed reviews, but kept her in the public conversation. She had contributed columns on fitness and wellness to publications including the Waitrose Weekend magazine and various society titles. She attended Wimbledon, appeared at charity events, showed up at royal functions alongside her sister. Her presence in public life was not vanity. It was, in many ways, her career and her identity woven together. James wanted none of it. Not the photographers at the end of the driveway, not the speculation about their marriage in the tabloids, not the constant association with Kensington Palace and everything that came with it. He tolerated the attention because he loved her, but tolerance is not acceptance, and over time the gap between toleration and genuine comfort grew wider in ways that neither of them could fully bridge. Royal commentator and journalist Richard Kay, who has covered the Middleton family for the Daily Mail for years, observed in various columns that Pippa appeared increasingly solo at public events in the years following her marriage, a pattern that spoke not of independence but of quiet separation. Friends close to both families reportedly told sources that the couple had attempted to find common ground, had taken private holidays together, had tried to reset the balance. But the structural incompatibility was too deep. She needed to be visible. He needed to disappear. There was also the matter of family. When James's younger brother Spencer Matthews married Irish television presenter Vogue Williams, it introduced a new and complicated dynamic into the extended family circle. Vogue Williams is, by personality and profession, the opposite of discreet. She built her career on openness, embraced media attention, and ran a popular podcast where she discussed her personal life, relationships, and opinions freely. According to sources familiar with both women, Pippa and Vogue were never enemies in any dramatic sense, but they were never close either. The friction was subtle, the kind that surfaces in clipped exchanges at family gatherings, in carefully worded podcast comments that land just ambiguously enough to avoid direct confrontation, but clearly enough that anyone paying attention understands the target. For Pippa, this was deeply uncomfortable. The Middleton family had always operated on a principle of controlled discretion. Say little, reveal nothing, protect the narrative. The Matthews family, at least on Spencer and Vogue's side, operated with no such restraint. It was a collision of cultures playing out in slow motion at every family event, and it added another layer of invisible pressure onto a marriage that was already showing stress fractures. What the public also did not fully grasp was the identity crisis quietly building inside Pippa throughout these years. She had spent her entire adult life in a peculiar position, perpetually framed by someone else's story. She was Kate's sister before she was herself. She was James's wife before she was herself. Every headline came prefaced by someone else's name. Every achievement was filtered through the lens of royal proximity. In a rare candid moment during a 2012 interview, Pippa admitted to feeling what she described as a form of public bullying. Not physical, not direct, but the cumulative weight of strangers dissecting her appearance, her choices, her relationships, in a way that she had never consented to and could never fully escape. That admission, small as it seemed at the time, revealed something important about how she experienced fame. It was not a gift she had received gracefully. It was a weight she had learned to carry quietly, and the carrying of it had cost her more than she publicly acknowledged. By the time whispers of a separation began circulating among royal correspondents in 2024, the signs had been present for years to anyone watching carefully. Pippa had stopped appearing at events with James. Their joint public appearances, which had already been infrequent, became essentially non-existent. She attended weddings alone. She arrived at charity events unaccompanied. Vacation photographs, which had briefly resurfaced in the early years of their marriage, the two of them poolside, neutral and polite, but notably lacking in warmth, had stopped appearing altogether. No spokesperson confirmed a separation. No legal documents were made public. But in the world Pippa inhabited, silence was always its own kind of statement. The woman who had once written about celebrating life's occasions with careful attention to detail was no longer celebrating this particular occasion in any visible way. The actual reason, as Pippa has increasingly allowed to surface through her guarded communications and the observations of those closest to her situation, was not one dramatic failure. It was the accumulated weight of incompatibility, a man who needed quiet and a woman who needed space to exist in the world they had built together. It was the pressure of performing a perfect marriage for a public that had decided their relationship was part of the royal story, whether they wanted it to be or not. It was the internal exhaustion of being everything to everyone. A flawless Middleton, a visible public figure, a devoted mother to their 3 children, and a wife to a man who fundamentally did not want to share the life she needed to live. These are not failures of love. They are failures of compatibility, and they are perhaps the most honest and most painful kind of ending a marriage can have. There is no villain in Pippa Middleton's story. There is only a woman who spent decades trying to be everything the world expected, and a marriage that ultimately could not survive the weight of those expectations on both sides. At 41, Pippa Middleton is not broken. She is not lost. If anything, the composure with which she has handled every public aspect of this deeply private unraveling suggests a woman who has, perhaps for the first time in her adult life, decided to stop performing and simply be. The girl who accidentally became famous at her sister's wedding is still here, quieter now, more deliberate, choosing her spaces with the kind of care that only comes from having once had no choice at all. Whatever chapter comes next for her will be written on her own terms. And for Pippa Middleton, that may be the most defining thing she has ever done.